Today, we begin a story that speaks to every heart that has ever dreamed of a better life. It is the story of a poor boy who had nothing, no money, no comfort, no luck, yet found something far more powerful than all of those things combined: belief. Because sometimes it's not the things we have that shape our destiny, but the things we dare to believe in when we have nothing left. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this boy. His shoes are torn, his stomach empty, but his eyes still shine. Around him is the dust of poverty, but inside him burns the fire of hope. This is not just his story. It is the story of every person who ever felt small, forgotten, or lost, but still whispered to themselves, "One day I'll make it." In this story, we won't just talk about money. We'll talk about something greater: the power of the human spirit. You will see how one decision, one small act of courage, can change the direction of a life. You will see how failure becomes a teacher and pain becomes a map that leads toward wisdom. As you listen, don't just follow the words, feel them. Let this story teach you new English, yes, but also a new way to think. Every sentence carries a lesson. Every moment holds a message. Because learning English is not only about speaking another language, it's about understanding life in deeper ways. This is the story of how the poorest boy in the village learned to see the invisible path to success. The road was long, filled with dust, hunger, and doubt, but he kept walking. And one day, he discovered that success doesn't begin with money. It begins with mindset. So, if you've ever felt poor, stuck, or unsure of your future, this story is for you. It will remind you that no dream is too big and no person is too small to dream. Let's begin the journey. The journey from the dirt road of poverty to the golden road of success. The world of struggle. The sun rose early in the small village where the boy lived, painting the sky with soft gold. But for him, morning light did not mean comfort. It meant work. It meant another day of carrying baskets, another day of running barefoot through dusty roads to help his mother sell fruits in the marketplace. He was young, but life had already taught him that survival was not easy. While other children played, he counted coins. While others went to school with full stomachs, he studied the faces of hungry people, learning early what pain looked like. His house was small, built from thin wood and rusted metal. When it rained, drops fell through the roof like tears from the sky. His mother tried to smile, but her hands told a different story: cracked, tired, and old before their time. Still, she never gave up. Every morning she whispered to him, "Work hard, my son. One day your life will change." Those words became his first lesson in hope. At the market, he shouted the names of fruits, his small voice echoing between stalls. Some people ignored him, some laughed, but a few smiled and bought what he offered. He learned that kindness often came from those who had little themselves. When business was slow, he sat under a tree, watching people in clean clothes, wondering how it felt to walk without worry. Deep inside, a quiet fire grew, a fire that whispered, "I want more than this life." At night, when the village fell silent, he walked to the nearest streetlight, the only one that worked. There, with his old school books, he studied. The pages were torn, but his desire to learn was whole. Mosquitoes bit his skin, cold air touched his face, but his eyes never left the words. He didn't understand every sentence, but he repeated them until they made sense. That light became his second home, a symbol of his hunger, not for food, but for knowledge. Sometimes he felt weak. His clothes were thin, his stomach empty. He saw others living comfortably, eating well, wearing shoes that actually fit. For a moment, jealousy knocked at his heart. But then he remembered his mother's eyes, gentle but strong, and he told himself, "If I cannot change my life today, I can change how I think about it." That thought gave him strength. It was his first spark of resilience. The seasons passed, and so did his childhood. He watched his friends give up on school, choosing to work in farms or factories. They laughed at his dreams, saying, "You can't change your life. People like us are born to stay poor." Their words hurt, but he refused to believe them. He knew there had to be more. Somewhere beyond the fields, beyond the horizon, there was a life waiting. One that didn't begin with suffering and end with silence. Still, the days were hard. Some mornings, they had no breakfast. He would leave home pretending he wasn't hungry so his mother could eat. His shoes wore out completely, and sometimes he walked barefoot to save them for longer trips. But each step taught him endurance. Every ache became a reminder that comfort is not a right. It is a reward. One evening, as he walked home from the market, he saw the reflection of the sunset in a puddle. For a moment, the sky looked like gold. He smiled and thought, "Maybe one day my life will shine like that too." That simple thought carried him through countless dark nights. It became a quiet promise between him and his future, that he would not stay trapped in struggle forever. And though his world was full of pain, it was also full of lessons. The boy learned to listen, to observe, to notice the rhythm of life. He understood that people who have little often have the richest hearts. He learned that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through tired hands and hopeful eyes. Each morning, he woke up to the same hard life, but his mind began to change. The fruit baskets felt lighter because he carried them with purpose. The nights felt shorter because he studied with hope. The boy was still poor, but his thoughts were no longer trapped by poverty. Deep down, he believed that one day his story would not be about what he lacked, but about what he learned. And perhaps that belief, fragile yet fierce, was the beginning of everything that would come next. Because sometimes, the world of struggle is not a punishment. It is a classroom. It teaches lessons that no rich man can buy and no book can explain. But sometimes, life's hardest days are not meant to break us. They are meant to wake us. The seed of dream. It was a quiet afternoon in the market. The sun was high and the air shimmered with heat. The boy sat under the same old tree, his basket half empty, his energy almost gone. He had been working since morning, shouting, smiling, hoping, but few had stopped to buy. His throat was dry, his stomach empty, and his heart heavy. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly tired, not just of the work, but of the life itself. He looked at his small pile of coins and whispered, "Is this all my life will ever be?" Just then, a gentle voice broke through his thoughts. "Why such a sad face, young man?" The boy looked up. In front of him stood an old traveler, his clothes dusty from the road, but his eyes calm, bright, and full of warmth. He carried a small bag and a walking stick, and when he smiled, There was something peaceful about him, as if he had seen much of the world and still believed in its goodness. The boy hesitated, but finally said, "I work hard every day, sir. I sell fruits, I study when I can. But no matter what I do, I'm still poor. Maybe this is just my fate." The old man sat beside him. "Fate?" he repeated softly. "Do you know what fate really is?" The boy shook his head. "Fate," the man said, "is not what happens to you. It's how you choose to respond to what happens. You see, my boy, success doesn't begin with money. It begins with the mind. The richest people in the world were once poor, poor in food, poor in comfort, but never poor in vision." The boy listened quietly. His heart beat faster. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. The man continued, "You think your problem is poverty, but it's not. Your real problem is that you've accepted poverty as your identity. You believe you were born to struggle. But what if you were born to grow instead? What if every hardship you face is actually preparing you for something greater?" The words felt like lightning inside the boy's mind. He had heard many things in his short life: advice, orders, complaints, but never such wisdom. It was as if the man was not speaking to his ears, but to his soul. The boy whispered, "But I have nothing, no education, no connections. How can someone like me ever become successful?" The old man smiled again. "You already have the first tool, hunger. Not hunger for food, but hunger for change. That is where every great story begins. The poor wait for a miracle. The wise create one. The world doesn't give success. It reveals it to those who dare to search." The boy looked down at his rough hands. For the first time, he saw them differently. These were not hands of failure. They were hands that worked, that created, that built. He looked up and asked, "But how do I start?" "Start with your thoughts," said the man. "Start by changing what you say to yourself. You say, 'I am poor.' Instead, say, 'I am learning.' You say, 'I can't.' Instead, say, 'I will try.' The moment you change your language, you change your future. The mind is like soil. Whatever you plant in it, fear or faith, it will grow." The boy sat silently, letting the words sink in. Around them, the market buzzed with life, sellers calling, children laughing. But inside his heart, something quiet yet powerful began to move. It was a small spark, but it felt like the beginning of light. Before leaving, the old man placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Remember," he said gently, "a seed doesn't become a tree overnight. It grows slowly, quietly, through wind, sun, and rain. Be patient with your journey, but never stop growing." And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, the traveler walked away, his figure disappearing down the long road. The boy watched him go until he was only a shadow against the setting sun. That night, the boy didn't go to sleep early. He sat under the streetlight again, but this time, his mind was alive. The man's words echoed in his heart. Success begins in the mind. He repeated the sentence over and over until it became a rhythm. For the first time, he didn't feel like a victim of life. He felt like a student of it. He took a small piece of paper and wrote down a few words in shaky handwriting. "I can learn. I can grow. I will not stay poor forever." It was the first time he had ever written a promise to himself. In the days that followed, something changed in the boy. The same world that once felt heavy now looked different. The same street seemed brighter, the same work less painful. Even when business was slow, he smiled, remembering the traveler's wisdom. When others complained, he stayed quiet, saving his energy for learning. He began to see every challenge as a test. Every failure became a teacher. And though his pockets were still empty, his heart was full of belief. Because that day, under the hot sun of the marketplace, something unseen had been planted in him. A seed, the seed of a dream. And like every living thing, it only needed time, effort, and faith to grow. From that day, he stopped asking, "Why am I poor?" and started asking, "How can I grow?" Learning through failure. The boy was no longer a child. The years had passed, and though his body had grown stronger, his life remained hard. But something inside him had changed. The seed planted by the old traveler had taken root. He no longer waited for luck. He started searching for opportunity. His first job was shining shoes near the bus station. From sunrise to sunset, he kneeled on the ground, cleaning the dust from strangers' shoes. The pay was small, but it was honest work. Some customers were kind, leaving extra coins and a smile. Others shouted at him or refused to pay at all. He learned early that the world was not always fair, but fairness was not the point. Character was. Every time he rubbed the shoes until they shone like mirrors, he told himself, "I may be poor, but I will never be lazy." Still, there were bad days. Rain would fall, soaking his small box and ruining his brushes. His hands cracked from the polish, and his back ached from kneeling too long. He often thought of quitting, but then he remembered the old man's words. "The mind is soil. What you plant will grow." So he decided to plant persistence. When the shoe-shining business slowed, he tried something new. He carried boxes at the market for shopkeepers, earning a few coins for each trip. It was heavy work, but he learned the value of service. That every job, no matter how small, could be done with pride. One afternoon, he dropped a box and broke several glass bottles. The owner yelled, "You careless boy! You'll never learn." The boy apologized, worked late to pay for the loss, and walked home silently. That night, under the familiar streetlight, he didn't cry. He thought, "Mistakes are not the end," he whispered. "They are just lessons in disguise." He realized something powerful. Failure was not the opposite of success. It was the path to it. The next morning, he went back, ready to work again. The shopkeeper, surprised by his courage, said, "You're back?" The boy nodded. "Yes, sir, I still have more to learn." The man smiled for the first time. That day, the boy learned another lesson. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to act even when afraid. After a few months, he saved enough money to start selling small snacks. He bought some peanuts, roasted them at home, and packed them into paper bags. He stood by the roadside calling, "Hot peanuts." Fresh and tasty. At first, people ignored him. Some laughed, saying, "A peanut seller can never become rich." But the boy didn't care. He was proud of his little business because it was his own. Business was slow in the beginning. The first week, he earned almost nothing. The second week, a sudden rainstorm ruined all his peanuts. The third week, a dog ran off with half his bag. But instead of giving up, he asked himself a question the traveler had once taught him. What can I learn from this? He learned to protect his goods with plastic covers. He learned to greet customers with a smile. He learned that failure teaches faster than success ever could. Soon, people began to recognize him, the polite boy with determination in his eyes. Still, life was far from easy. There were days when he felt invisible, when hope felt like a distant dream. He watched people in clean clothes walk past him, carrying books, phones, and dreams bigger than his. Sometimes envy whispered in his ear, "They were born lucky. You were not." But another voice inside, stronger, quieter, replied, "Luck is not born. It is built." That belief kept him moving forward. He worked during the day and studied at night, learning not only from books but from people. He watched how sellers spoke to customers, how some treated others kindly, and how others lost respect through greed. He saw how honesty built trust, even when it didn't bring fast money. He told himself, "If I cannot afford to buy gold, I can at least build golden habits." Months turned into years. The boy failed many times, in business, in trust, even in friendship. Once, he partnered with another seller who promised to share profits but ran away with the money. Another time, he borrowed money to buy supplies and couldn't sell enough to repay it. Each time, the pain cut deep. But each time, he returned stronger. He began to understand that life was like climbing a mountain. The higher he climbed, the harder it became. But the view, the lesson, the growth, the perspective, made every step worth it. One evening, after a long day, he sat again under that same old streetlight. He thought of all his failures, the broken bottles, the lost coins, the ruined peanuts, the stolen money. But when he added them all together, he realized something incredible. Every failure had taught him something that success never could. Failure had taught him patience. Failure had taught him humility. Failure had taught him how to begin again without fear. He looked up at the night sky. The stars were faint, but they were there, shining quietly, like his dreams. He smiled and said softly, "So this is what it means to grow." The next morning he began again, not as a boy who had failed many times, but as a man who had learned many lessons. His heart was lighter, his vision clearer. He no longer feared falling because he knew how to rise. He realized that success is not a straight road. It is a path filled with bumps, wrong turns, and broken signs. The ones who make it are not the fastest or the smartest, but the ones who keep walking even when their legs are tired. And so he did. Every coin he earned became a symbol of effort. Every mistake became a page in his invisible book of wisdom. He didn't see it yet, but every fall was secretly preparing him for something bigger. He had learned that to reach the top, you must first learn how to stand up after every fall. And every fall gave him strength. Until one day, a new idea changed everything. The first spark of business. The morning sun rose over the crowded streets, painting the roofs of the small town in golden light. The boy walked with purpose through the market, his mind busy with thoughts. He had tried many small jobs, shining shoes, carrying boxes, selling snacks, and failed more than once. But failure no longer frightened him. It had become his teacher. What he needed now was not luck, but an idea. One afternoon, while walking near the train station, he noticed something simple yet powerful. Every morning, hundreds of workers arrived by train, tired, sleepy, and rushing to work. Many of them stopped at a small corner to buy tea. But the tea seller was often late and people complained. "Why doesn't someone open earlier?" one man said angrily. That sentence lit a spark in the boy's mind. What if I sell tea before everyone else arrives? He had no shop, no table, and no money for a big setup. But he remembered the lesson the old man once told him. Use what you have, not what you wish you had. So he borrowed a small kettle from his mother and bought a handful of tea leaves with his savings. He found an old cart that had been left behind in the alley, cleaned it carefully, and turned it into his first business stall. The next morning, before sunrise, he boiled water and prepared the first pot of tea. The aroma filled the air, warm, comforting, and inviting. When the first train arrived, he called out softly, "Hot tea." Fresh and sweet, a few workers stopped. They tasted it, smiled, and nodded. "Good tea, boy. I'll take another cup tomorrow." That small moment felt like a victory. His heart beat fast, not because of money, but because of proof. Proof that action creates change. By the end of the week, he was selling dozens of cups every morning. He saved each coin, counting them with pride under the same streetlight where he once studied. His tea stall became a familiar sight. People began to greet him warmly. "Good morning, young man." Some shared stories from their lives, tired workers, travelers, students, all connecting over a simple cup of tea. Through these moments, he learned not just how to sell, but how to serve. He listened, smiled, and treated each customer with respect. Slowly, his tea cart became more than a business. It became a meeting place for the people of the station. But success, as he soon learned, never comes without tests. One rainy morning, his firewood got wet and he couldn't make tea on time. Customers grew impatient. Some left angrily. His earnings dropped that week and doubt crept in. He wondered if his small dream would end like his earlier failures. But then he remembered. Every problem hides a lesson. The next day, he built a small cover using bamboo and plastic to protect the fire from rain. When the weather turned bad again, he was ready. The tea boiled, steam rising like hope in the air. Customers noticed his preparation. One man said, "You're clever, boy. You think ahead." That compliment stayed with him for days. He began to innovate, adding lemon for flavor, using clay cups for a rustic touch, even offering a discount to regulars. His tiny improvements made people feel special. Soon, he was selling out before noon. For the first time in his life, he didn't worry about what he lacked. He focused on what he could create. At night, he wrote ideas in a small notebook. Learn how to save money, buy better tea leaves, make a signboard. He didn't know it then, but he was building the habits of an entrepreneur. He was learning that business was not about size. It was about service, creativity, and consistency. Still, challenges kept coming. A new tea seller set up a stall nearby, offering cheaper prices. Some customers left. The boy felt discouraged, but instead of complaining, he studied the competitor. He noticed that the other seller rushed his work, didn't smile, and often argued with customers. The boy decided to do the opposite. He served patiently, kept his stall clean, and thanked every customer sincerely. Slowly, his kindness brought people back. He learned another golden rule. People may forget your price, but they never forget how you made them feel. As days turned into months, the boy's confidence grew. He started waking up even earlier, preparing not only tea but also small snacks, biscuits, roasted corn, and peanuts. His small idea was expanding. He had become known as the early bird tea seller, and his regulars trusted him completely. Some even paid in advance. But success has a strange habit. It always tests you before it blesses you. One evening, as he was closing his stall, a strong wind blew through the station. His cart tipped over, the kettle fell, and the hot tea spilled across the ground. The cart broke, his supplies were ruined, and his heart sank. He sat down, feeling defeated. All his savings seemed wasted in one terrible moment. For hours he stayed there, silent, watching the night trains pass by. Then he remembered something he once whispered to himself. If I can survive failure, I can survive anything. The next morning he went back, not to cry, but to rebuild. He collected the broken wood, fixed what he could, and borrowed a new kettle from a kind shopkeeper. When customers saw him working again, they were touched. Some offered help. One man gave him extra firewood. Another donated old cups. The boy realized something deeper than profit. When you serve others sincerely, life finds ways to serve you back. Within days, his tea stall was open again, stronger, cleaner, and more beautiful than before. He added a small sign made from cardboard that said, "Fresh tea every morning." People smiled when they saw it. It wasn't fancy, but it was a symbol of his persistence. His business began to grow steadily. He saved enough to buy his own kettle, then 2 more. He hired a younger boy to help him during busy hours, giving him the same advice he once received. Work hard, stay honest, never give up. That tea stall, born from nothing but a dream and determination, became the first spark of something greater. The boy was no longer just selling tea. He was learning how to build trust, how to solve problems, and how to believe in his own ideas. He had turned excuses into action and hope into results. The dirt road of poverty was slowly turning into the golden road of success, 1 cup at a time. But as every journey teaches, the higher you climb, the stronger the wind becomes. And soon, a new test would come, one that would decide whether the boy's dream was built on luck or on true strength. The storm of setbacks. For a while, everything looked bright. The boy's tea stall had become the heartbeat of the train station. He woke up every morning before the sun, ready to serve familiar faces. His hands moved with confidence. His smile carried quiet pride. But life has its seasons, and even after the brightest summer, storms always find a way to return. It began slowly, almost quietly. A new shop opened just across the road, bigger, cleaner, and full of shiny equipment. Their signboards sparkled, their cups were printed with logos, and their prices were lower. At first, the boy didn't worry. He believed people would stay loyal. But within a few weeks, his regular customers began drifting away. "I'll be back tomorrow," they said, but they didn't return. The once busy mornings grew silent. His coins stopped clinking in the tin box. For the first time in months, he felt fear again. He tried to improve things. He made his tea stronger, served it faster, even added new flavors. But the other shop had more hands, more money, and more attraction. The boy's small stall looked weak beside it. One night, as he counted his few remaining coins, tears filled his eyes. He thought of all the mornings he had worked in rain and cold. He whispered to himself, "Why does life keep testing me?" Soon after, a cruel twist followed. The helper he had hired, the young boy he trusted, started stealing from him. Small amounts at first, a few coins missing each day. Then, one morning, both the helper and the savings box disappeared. His heart broke more than his wallet. He wasn't angry about the money. He was hurt because trust had been betrayed. The days that followed were heavy. The market noise that once gave him energy now felt like thunder in his ears. Some nights, he didn't even light his stove. He just sat under the old streetlight, staring at the empty cup in his hand. The same light that once guided his dreams now seemed to shine on his failure. But sometimes, pain becomes a mirror. It shows you who you really are. One evening, as he watched the trains come and go, he remembered something his mother used to say. A storm doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to clean the air. Those words struck deep. Maybe this storm was not here to end him, but to shape him. The next morning, he forced himself to open the stall again. The station was quiet, the sky gray, and the air smelled of dust. He sold only a few cups that day, but each one mattered. Each customer who stopped gave him a reason to stay. Slowly, the silence in his heart began to break. He started observing again, learning, not complaining. He noticed that the new shop served tea quickly but without warmth. Their workers rarely smiled. Customers came and left, but they didn't feel connected. The boy realized his real advantage wasn't money. It was care. He decided to use that. He cleaned his stall, painted the wood, and began greeting every person with genuine kindness. He added small touches, offering free refills to tired workers, giving discounts to students, saving a cup for the old man who always arrived late. Word began to spread again. That boy, people said, his tea has a heart. But the storm wasn't finished yet. One night, heavy rain flooded the station. The roof above his stall leaked, soaking his supplies. The next morning, he found his kettle rusted and his cups broken. His heart ached. He had no savings left to buy new ones. For a moment, despair won. He sat in the mud, rainwater mixing with his tears, and thought of giving up. Yet deep inside, another voice whispered, calm but powerful. You've fallen before. You've risen before. You can do it again. He took a deep breath, stood up, and walked to a nearby scrapyard. There, among piles of old metal, he found a used kettle. He polished it until it shone. He borrowed a few cups from a friend and returned to the station. That day, he made tea again. Not perfect tea, but tea made with strength. Slowly, people noticed. They admired his courage. Even the rival shopkeeper watched in silence as customers began returning, drawn by something no business could buy: resilience. The boy wasn't competing anymore. He was simply enduring, and that endurance was more powerful than any advertisement. Weeks passed, and things started to balance. The new shop lost its shine. Workers quit. Customers drifted back to the boy who never gave up. He learned a deep truth. Storms don't just test your patience. They reveal your power. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fire, he stood outside his stall, hands resting on the wooden counter. The wind brushed against his face, the same wind that once tried to knock him down. But now it felt different. It felt like applause. He smiled softly, watching a young customer sipping tea with joy. In that moment, he understood something timeless. Success isn't about never falling. It's about rising one more time than you fall. He fell again, but this time he knew something the world didn't. He had learned how to rise. The mindset shift. After the storm came a strange kind of silence. Not the silence of defeat, but of reflection. The boy had faced loss, betrayal, and failure, yet something inside him refused to break. He realized that real poverty was not outside him. It was inside his mind. He could lose his stall, his savings, even his friends, but if he lost his belief, he would lose everything. That thought became the seed of his next transformation. One evening, while packing up his tea stall, he noticed a traveler sitting nearby. The man wore simple clothes but spoke with calm confidence. He wasn't rich, yet he carried an air of peace. The boy served him tea and they began to talk. The traveler told him stories of great thinkers, of dreamers who started with nothing, of people who built their lives not from money but from mindset. "If you want to grow," the man said, "feed your mind before your pocket." Those words struck deep. The boy realized he had been feeding his body with tea but starving his mind with ignorance. The next day, he walked to the local library, a place he had never entered before. The shelves smelled of old paper and quiet wisdom. He couldn't read fast, but he was hungry to learn. He borrowed his first book, a simple story about self-belief. Every evening, after closing his stall, he sat under the streetlight and read. The same light that once guided his homework now guided his soul. At first, it was difficult. The words were new, the ideas strange. He often had to read sentences twice, sometimes 3 times. But slowly, something changed. His thoughts became sharper. His speech became clearer. When people complained around him, he didn't join them. He listened and then smiled. He began to see how most people lived reacting to life instead of designing it. They complained about problems but never practiced patience. They wanted success without sacrifice. One night, as he read a line that said, "Discipline is the bridge between dreams and reality," he paused. He looked around his small room, the thin mattress, the cracked wall, the single candle. He whispered to himself, "If I stay disciplined, this room won't define me forever." From that night, he began to live differently. He woke up earlier than before, sometimes before sunrise. Instead of worrying, he planned. Instead of comparing, he improved. He divided his time between work, reading, and reflection. At the tea stall, he no longer only sold tea. He listened to people's stories. He began to notice their words, their habits, their fears. He learned that success begins in the mind long before it appears in life. Soon he met new people, small traders, students, travelers, and he asked them questions. How did they think? What did they believe? What made them happy? Every conversation became a classroom. He was learning not from a school, but from life itself. But inner growth isn't easy. Sometimes his old habits returned: laziness, anger, impatience. There were days he felt tired, questioning if books and mindset really mattered when the world still looked the same. But then he remembered something powerful. If you plant a seed today, you don't eat the fruit tomorrow. Growth needs time. Patience is the test of belief. Slowly, his way of seeing life changed. When rain came, he didn't curse the weather. He thanked it for bringing customers who wanted something warm. When business was slow, he didn't complain. He used that time to read or clean. The boy who once reacted to every challenge now responded with calm. He understood that he couldn't control everything, only how he faced it. He began writing his thoughts in a small notebook. Lessons from books, ideas from people, dreams for the future. Every page was a reminder that he was no longer just surviving. He was growing. Sometimes, other sellers at the station laughed at him. "You and your books," they said. "Books won't fill your stomach." He smiled quietly. "Maybe not today," he replied, "but they'll feed my mind, and that will feed my future." Months passed, and people started noticing the change. His words carried weight. When someone was sad, he encouraged them. When another vendor struggled, he offered advice instead of pity. His customers didn't just come for tea anymore. They came for wisdom. They said his words made their mornings brighter. Slowly, his stall became more than a place of business. It became a place of learning, of hope. He started keeping a small box beside the counter labeled ideas. When customers shared something inspiring, he wrote it down and dropped it inside. At the end of the week, he opened the box and read each note aloud to himself. They became his lessons, his silent teachers. Each idea made him stronger, wiser, more confident. One evening, as the sun set behind the tracks, the boy looked around and realized something extraordinary. Nothing outside him had changed dramatically, but everything inside him had. His thoughts were clearer, his emotions calmer, his vision brighter. He no longer dreamed of escaping poverty. He dreamed of educating himself out of it. That night, he made a decision that would shape the rest of his life. He promised himself that every day, no matter how tired he was, he would read at least one page, learn one new word, and practice one act of discipline. It didn't matter how small the step was. What mattered was the direction. He began to speak differently too. Instead of saying, "I can't," he said, "I'll try." Instead of blaming, he began asking, "What can I learn from this?" This simple change in language reshaped his reality. His English improved. His communication grew stronger. Customers listened to him, not just for his tea, but for his clarity. He realized that while money could buy comfort, knowledge could buy freedom. Books became his best investment, words his currency, and thoughts his greatest wealth. And so the boy who once sold tea began to sell hope. He became a quiet mentor to those around him, the vendors, the students, the travelers who stopped for a drink but left with inspiration. People began calling him the wise boy, and even older men listened when he spoke. He had discovered the real meaning of success, not to escape struggle, but to understand it, learn from it, and use it as fuel for growth. The boy who once sold fruit began to sell ideas, and people listened. Building the empire. By now, the boy had learned to think like a builder, not of walls or stalls, but of dreams. His new mindset gave him eyes that could see what others missed. Where most people saw problems, he saw possibilities. He understood something powerful. Success is not about what you get. It's about what you give. And that belief became the foundation of everything that followed. One day, while serving tea to a group of traders at the station, he overheard them complaining about a problem. "We can't find good helpers," one said. "They either quit too soon or don't care about the work." The boy listened quietly. That night, the idea kept echoing in his mind. Good service is rare. The next morning, he made a decision that would change his life forever. He would start a business built not just on products, but on service, trust, and heart. He saved every extra coin he could, skipped meals, and worked longer hours. Slowly, he gathered enough to rent a small corner shop near the station. It wasn't much, just a few wooden shelves and an old table. But it was his. He cleaned it until it shined, painted a sign that read, "Bright Hands, we work with care," and offered simple services, cleaning, delivery, repair. His goal wasn't to impress, it was to serve better than anyone else. At first, people didn't believe in him. "He's just a tea boy," they whispered. "What does he know about business?" But he didn't waste time arguing. He let his work speak. When a customer brought a broken fan, he repaired it faster than promised and refused extra pay. When someone couldn't afford service, he said, "Pay me when you can." Word spread quickly. People trusted him, not because of his shop, but because of his sincerity. Within months, his tiny shop became the busiest on the street. He hired 2 helpers, young boys like he once was. He trained them not only to work, but to care. "Don't serve people for money," he told them. "Serve them for meaning. Money will follow." Under his guidance, the boys learned more than a skill. They learned a mindset. Each day felt like a victory. Not because of the earnings, but because he could finally give others what he once needed: opportunity. He remembered the nights when he studied under the streetlight, and now he paid for his helpers' evening classes. "Education," he said, "is the best profit we can earn." His business grew slowly but steadily. Customers became friends. Suppliers offered better prices because they trusted his honesty. He kept a small notebook where he wrote every expense, every lesson, and every gratitude. He knew that discipline wasn't a moment. It was a lifestyle. Soon, he faced a new kind of challenge: growth. More orders came in than he could handle. He needed to think bigger. Instead of saying, "I can't," he asked, "How can I?" That question changed everything. He decided to expand his services to nearby towns. He taught his helpers how to lead others, creating small teams that carried his values: honesty, patience, and care. He didn't just build a business. He built a family of workers who shared his vision. Together, they created something rare in the world of trade: trust. There were days when he felt overwhelmed. Managing people wasn't easy. Some made mistakes, others disappointed him. But he remembered his past, how every failure had been a teacher. So instead of punishing mistakes, he turned them into lessons. "If you fail," he told his team, "learn quickly and rise faster." His leadership was not built on fear, but on faith. As months turned to years, the small shop became a network of branches. His logo appeared in towns he had never visited. He employed dozens of workers, many of whom came from poor backgrounds like his own. He made sure each of them was treated with dignity. He paid fair wages, shared profits, and gave bonuses not only for performance, but for kindness. One morning, as he walked through the busy street filled with his delivery vans, he felt a quiet pride. The boy who once sold tea in the dust was now running an enterprise that served hundreds. But even more important than the size of his business was the size of his heart. He had not forgotten where he came from. He still stopped to buy fruit from street vendors, still greeted his old customers, still gave free tea to the station guards. Success had changed his surroundings, but not his soul. He began speaking at small community events, sharing his story. People were amazed to see how a boy with no degree, no inheritance, and no power had built something extraordinary. "What's your secret?" they asked. He smiled and said, "Mindset. Work with purpose. Give more than you take." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of experience. He also began encouraging young people to read. He built a small library in his office with books that had once changed his life. On weekends, he invited children from poor families to read, learn English, and dream. He knew that real wealth was not gold or property. It was wisdom passed forward. His company soon gained recognition. A local newspaper published an article titled, "From Street Tea to City Enterprise." Customers doubled overnight. Business leaders visited him, curious to learn how he created such loyalty. He told them, "You don't build a company with money. You build it with trust, with care, and with people." Yet even with all this growth, he never stopped working on himself. Every morning, he still read a few pages of a book. Every evening, he still wrote in his journal, not about profits, but about progress. He believed that inner growth fuels outer success. His team began calling him Sir, but he always corrected them. "I'm not your boss," he said. "I'm your brother in purpose." This humility became the culture of his business. Customers felt it, workers felt it. Everyone who met him felt it. And though his business had grown beyond anything he once imagined, he didn't build it for luxury. He built it to give meaning. He sponsored schools, supported farmers, and opened opportunities for women to work from home. Each act of giving added invisible value to his wealth. One evening, as he stood on the terrace of his office, watching the city lights sparkle, he thought of his past. The boy who once cried over a broken kettle, the boy who read under a streetlight, the boy who believed when no one else did. A gentle smile touched his face. He whispered to himself, "I didn't build an empire. I built myself. And that built everything else." He finally understood that true success isn't about escaping poverty. It's about transforming it into purpose. His wealth wasn't measured in currency, but in character. The boy who had once been poor in possessions was now rich in principles. The world saw his business. He saw his blessings. But true success is not counted in money. It is counted in meaning. The meaning of wealth. The boy, now a young man, walked through his bustling office and paused for a moment. His eyes traveled over the busy workers, the humming machines, and the piles of orders ready to leave for towns near and far. From the outside, it looked like success: money, power, and influence. But inside, he felt a quiet truth rising. This is not what makes life rich. He remembered the nights he spent under the streetlight, studying by the dim glow of a candle. He remembered empty stomachs, wet clothes, and aching hands. He remembered every failure, every stolen coin, every storm that seemed too strong to survive. Those memories were not painful anymore. They were lessons. They had taught him that wealth is not counted in coins, but in knowledge gained and wisdom earned. Money could buy comfort, yes, but it could not buy patience, courage, or honesty. It could buy toys, but not happiness. It could buy fancy cups, but not loyalty. He realized that all the gold in the world could not fill the hunger of a restless mind. Real wealth, he understood, came from what you carried inside: discipline, gratitude, and heart. He began walking through the streets of his old neighborhood, where the narrow lanes and small homes reminded him of the boy he once was. Children ran past him, playing with worn-out balls and laughing with carefree joy. He stopped to watch them, remembering himself at their age, dreaming, hungry, struggling to learn. A thought struck him deeply. If someone had helped me then, my journey could have been easier. That night, he decided to act. He opened a small learning center for children from poor families. The rooms were simple, with old desks and used books, but the walls carried hope. He hired teachers who were patient, kind, and committed. Every evening, the children came, curious and eager. He didn't just pay for their lessons. He spent time with them, reading stories, teaching small words in English, explaining the world in simple terms. Watching them, he understood the real meaning of wealth. It was not what you accumulated, but what you shared. Every smile, every spark of understanding in a child's eyes was more valuable than any coin. He realized that giving back didn't make him poorer. It multiplied his own wealth in ways money never could. He also began teaching his team about inner wealth. Don't measure yourself by your salary, he told them. Measure yourself by your actions, your patience, and your honesty. Some young employees laughed at first, thinking it was simple talk, but over time, they understood. They saw that customers returned not because of low prices, but because of trust and care. They saw that their own lives grew richer when they worked with purpose. The man reflected on all he had endured: the dirt roads, broken kettles, failed businesses, and endless storms. Every challenge had been a teacher, every tear a lesson. And now, he could finally see the patterns of life clearly. Money was a tool, yes, a way to build, to protect, to create. But knowledge was a compass, kindness was a bridge, and self-control was the engine that drove everything forward. Without these, money could vanish in a moment. He often visited his old tea stall. The same wooden cart, the same street light, the same busy station. People who had once ignored him now nodded in respect, remembering the boy who had begun with so little. But he didn't feel pride in that recognition. His joy came from seeing others rise. The helpers he had trained, the children learning English, the vendors gaining confidence. True wealth, he realized, is watching others grow because you helped them along the way. One afternoon, he spoke at a small gathering of students and young workers. "Many think wealth is silver and gold," he said softly. "But real wealth is the power to control yourself, to learn every day and to help others. The world is full of opportunities, but only those with a rich mind and heart can turn them into lasting success." He remembered his old mentor, the traveler who first taught him to plant the seed of belief. The traveler had smiled and said, "The richest people are not those who have the most, but those who give the most." Now, standing in his own success, he understood those words fully. Money is a tool, yes, but the wealth of a life well lived is measured in love, learning, and integrity. The man often thought of the children he helped. Some had never touched a real book before he arrived. Some had never spoken English aloud. And yet, each day, they learned a little more. Every new word, every small achievement, reminded him of the boy who once struggled to survive. Every small success of theirs became a reflection of his journey, a reminder that wealth grows when it is shared. He also learned humility. Material riches can make people arrogant, but awareness makes them wise. He never flaunted his money, never boasted of his achievements. Instead, he smiled quietly, walked humbly, and listened to others. Ego, he realized, is the heaviest burden, heavier than any coin or debt. True wealth lightens the heart. At night, he often sat alone, thinking of the journey from poverty to prosperity. He counted not the money in his bank, but the lives he had touched. He measured success not in profits, but in the ripples of kindness, knowledge, and opportunity he had created. And in that quiet reflection, he felt a calm unlike anything money could buy. A peace born from giving, from learning, from living with purpose. The boy who had once cried over empty hands now smiled with full heart. He had discovered that life's richest treasures are invisible. The wisdom gained from struggle, the kindness shared with others, and the self-control that turns challenges into growth. And as he gave back to others, he discovered the greatest treasure of all, peace. Final reflection. Look closely at the journey we have shared. The boy who once ran barefoot through dusty streets carrying fruits for his mother is not just a story from a faraway town. His path is a mirror of life itself, a reflection of struggles, failures, and victories that each of us faces. Perhaps you are sitting there, learning English, feeling small, or doubting yourself. Listen carefully. This story is yours too. You don't need perfect English, rich parents, or lucky breaks to change your life. What you need is the will to learn, the courage to try, and the patience to grow. Life will not hand you success on a silver tray. The boy learned this early. Every failure, every stolen coin, every storm was a teacher in disguise. And yet, he chose not to give up. He chose to see possibility where others saw despair. This is the first lesson for you. Hopelessness is a shadow, but determination is the light that cuts through it. Every small effort, every step forward, no matter how tiny, builds the foundation of your future. Dreaming big is only the start. The boy's first idea, selling tea before the station opened, seemed insignificant at first. Yet that tiny spark grew because he acted on it, learned from it, and refused to quit. Your ideas, no matter how small or simple, can grow the same way. Action transforms dreams into reality. Waiting for perfect conditions is a trap. Starting now with what you have is freedom. But success is more than clever ideas. The boy discovered that true growth happens inside. He read, he learned, and he reflected. He disciplined his mind when the world tried to distract him. He replaced fear with courage, doubt with curiosity, and reaction with patience. English learners, take note. Every page you read, every word you practice, every moment you engage your mind, strengthens you far more than quick results ever could. Learning itself is power, and knowledge is a tool that no one can take from you. Kindness, too, became his wealth. The boy could have kept all he earned for himself, but he chose to give back. He helped other children, trained helpers, and served his community with heart. True success is never measured in coins alone. It is measured in the lives you touch, the hope you inspire, and the integrity you maintain. When you lift others, you rise with them. When you act with humility, you grow stronger than any challenge. Notice how every failure led to a lesson. Every storm taught resilience. Every obstacle demanded creativity. You may stumble, make mistakes, or feel lost. That is normal. The boy felt the same, but he learned to fall with grace and rise with purpose. Each setback became a stepping stone, each difficulty a teacher. Life's tests are not punishments. They are invitations to grow, to become the person you were meant to be. Now, look at the bigger picture. The boy's journey started with scarcity, pain, and doubt. It ended in abundance, not just of money, but of wisdom, connection, and peace. You can follow the same path. The distance between where you are and where you want to be is not measured by luck or circumstance. It is measured by effort, mindset, and courage. Start small, act consistently, and embrace every lesson along the way. Remember, success is not about being better than anyone else. It is about becoming better than your past self. It is about turning fear into fuel, weakness into strength, and curiosity into skill. English learners, entrepreneurs, students, all of you can take the same steps. Read, listen, practice, and reflect. Serve others, stay humble, and believe in the value of your own effort. Take a moment now. Close your eyes and think about one small action you can take today to move forward. Learning a new word, helping someone, or starting a project you have been delaying. That small step is your first spark. The boy began with tea. You can begin with words, ideas, or actions. Every empire begins with a single choice. As the boy discovered, wealth is not counted in coins. It is counted in knowledge, courage, and kindness. Success is not found in comfort, but in growth. And the most lasting joy comes not from what you take, but from what you give. So, as you continue learning English, building your life, or chasing your dreams, remember this. Every challenge is an opportunity, every failure is a lesson, and every act of persistence moves you closer to your vision. Hope is not a dream waiting for someone else to grant it. It is the decision to act today. And finally, carry this truth with you always. You don't need to be born rich to live richly. You only need to think like a learner.